Well, I wanted Electro, and we wanted Electro to be serious. I wanted him to be a formidable opponent. Even when I would see Andrew out, I saw him at Chelsea Pier, and I said, somebody really doesn't like you. Who's that? Who really doesn't like me? And I said,
don't speak like that.
So I told him, I said, I really want Electro to be angry. And I actually got the character from something that happened to me when I was in L.A. as a young comedian. I had a little situation. There was this gangster dude that said, if you ever need some help, let me know. And I needed his help one day, and I took the help. But then I was indebted to him. So every club I went to, yo, you got me, right? And I was like, huh? Yeah, I need to get in the club with you. And I said, I can only get one in. I got 9 with me. And I was like, so it was just this constant thing going through the city until finally I had to stand up and say, hey, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And then it turned on sort of this venom. So I took that character as Electro, that when Spider-Man says to Max, you know, we're partners, and he said it in passing, but I took it to heart. So when I turn into Electro, I don't want to let him off the hook. And I think that's what works. It makes the fight more epic. The fact that Electro is not talking a lot. He's just down to business. He wants to burn the city down, and he wants to get rid of Spider-Man. Well, what I wanted to do, and what we wanted to do, is we wanted to do 3 things as Max. We wanted to have 3 things happen. He needed to be betrayed by love, he needed to be betrayed by family, and he needed to be betrayed by his work. So that when you see the setup, when you see him as Max, and is it okay if I say what happens to him when they forget his birthday?
No.
No?
Yes.
No. Okay. Well, what happens is that we came up with the fact that Max Dillon, it's his birthday. And even his mom doesn't remember his birthday. So you see how you feel? Oh. But that sets it up, the fact that he says, Mom, it's a very special day today. You got anything you want to say? She says, I don't want to say anything to you. So what that does is that sets it up that when Electro does turn into this guy, there's a little bit of you saying, I understand where it's coming from. So it wasn't disturbing, but it was great to see that journey, the fact that we gave it more than one side. You know, it's three to 4 dimensional, that when he turns into this person, you understand where he's coming from.
This question is for Mark, Matt, and Avi. A little bit bummed that Shailene Woodley's not going to appear in this movie, as we heard, but excited about the idea of a longer-term plan. Does Shailene still have a part for Spider-Man 3, and would the scene have to be completely reworked, or a similar version of what was going to be?
Yes. You know, we miss Shailene, and I know you all understand that we all felt the story got just too big to have 2 girls. We always get this complaint, too many this, too many that, so it was the right thing to wait with it. The next movie will be in 3 years from now, more or less.
When I'm 45.
Years.
Yeah, we haven't crossed that bridge, so we just got to finish this movie first.
We love this girl, and time will tell.
Yes, Andrew.
Hey.
Coming back to this sequel, doing this the second time around, when we recorded this, is it still hard to be Peter Parker and easier to be Spider-Man, or has it gotten difficult being Spider-Man as well?
Oh, what a question. I like that question. I think what I discovered on this one is that it's just a mess. Peter's a mess, Spider-Man's a mess. But what's important to note is that when we meet Spider-Man at the beginning of this film, he's taking great pleasure in his power, and he's in full control of it. A little bit like Usain Bolt. His 25 minutes before he runs the 100 meters is his preparation is play, because he has the ability to do that. He accesses a very relaxed, free, playful state of mind, and so what I love about this Spider-Man now is that he has the confidence to not only be heroic, but it's not a boring heroism. He's able to mess with people as he's being heroic. He's Bugs Bunny to a certain degree, and also what I discovered is that Peter is his little brother in a way. He's in the shadow. Spider-Man gets all the power, the attention, and he gets to live out this fantasy life. But when he gets home, Peter has the bangs and the bruises and the aches and the pains. When the adrenaline has left his body, he has to look in the mirror and he has to see a real boy in the mirror, as opposed to this symbol that's greater than any human being. So that dynamic was really, really interesting. This inner dynamic between the older brother and the younger brother. And it's complicated, as it should be. Peter Parker has historically been complicated, and the more complicated, the better. The more guilt, the better. The more pain, the better for Peter, and the more joy and pleasure for Spider-Man, the better. So those two things were really fun to play.
For Andrew, what was the most important lesson you learned coming out of the first movie as an actor? Getting into this character, which is something that has helped you now in the second film.
Thank you for the question. Gosh, I learned so much from that first movie. I didn't really sleep on the first movie. I really took the responsibility to heart. I took Stan Lee's words to heart, and I still do. So I guess what I tried to do on this one is make sure that I could show up every day and give all of myself to it, because there were certain days where I just on the first one where I felt like I couldn't get to the place I wanted to get to emotionally, or I couldn't get to the place I wanted to get to physically, or I just felt burnt out. And so on this one I really wanted to treat myself like an athlete and take rest when I could, and luckily in this one I could, because Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi, with the help of Mark, Matt, and the whole team, and Avi, had crafted a story that didn't solely rest upon Peter's shoulders, or Spider-Man's shoulders. Alex and Bob, they wrote incredibly well-crafted characters across the board, a real ensemble, and enough to attract talent like this, and Paul Giamatti. And it's a real testament to the writing, and I got to sleep a little bit more, thankfully. The eyes are much bigger and better. You can see more. It's still as tight as it was before. I was able to urinate in this one easier. That was a very friendly adjustment from the costume designer Deb Scott. Aesthetically, I prefer it. To be honest, I dig it more. I just dig it more. I loved the first one. Don't get me wrong. I actually really did. But it's mostly my ability to urinate, which I'm happy about.
Leave it at that.
It was just very generous of them to set it up in that way.
Honestly, I didn't know what to expect going into it, because I had never made a movie this big. But I definitely wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did and walk away being as fulfilled as I was. I knew going into it that I was a big fan of Andrew and the first movie, and Andrew as an actor, and Jamie, obviously, and what Marc Webb had done with his first two movies. But I thought because of the magnitude of the movie, something artistically would be compromised. But actually, it was a great luxury to have that much time, and for the sets to be that amazing. And then with the script being as great as it was, I walked away fully satisfied. Yeah, and Metallica was awesome too.
Mark, second time around, what were the elements of Spider-Man character and story, some of the great traditions that you couldn't get to, versus what you were really excited to be able to give us time second time around?
Well, I think that there's a level of virtuosity in his physical capabilities that we really had fun playing around with, and there was a foundation of playfulness in this movie that there was hints of it in the first movie, but fun is crucial. And I think the first movie we had a lot of obligations. It was a little darker, and this one was from the outset has that level of play, and that I loved in Spider-Man growing up. And we did a lot of there's a lot of things that we did. For example, like just the physical comedy elements of it, which are very technical, very difficult. We had a guy that Andrew had suggested, a guy named Cal McChrystal, who came in and consulted with us in creating these kind of really sort of elaborate, simple, but elegant sequences where, Peter Parker or Spider-Man is having fun being Spider-Man. And I think physical comedy is something that's sort of a lost art. You know what I mean? And Andy Armstrong, Cal, and I, we all went back and looked at a lot of Buster Keaton movies, a lot of Charlie Chaplin, a lot of Harold Lloyd, and you look at these incredibly gifted artists and engineers back then, and how difficult the physical tasks of comedy like that was. It was something that we wanted to mess around with. And there's a few scenes that we did where we had to do sort of long takes. There was that one we did in the hallway that was I don't know how many takes we did, but it was just like incredibly demanding of Andrew, but also intensely pleasurable as a filmmaker. And I think people will appreciate that. Whether they notice the level of detail or the work that we put into it, I don't know. But that was something that was really fun to play around with that we didn't get to play around with in the first movie.
This question's for Jamie. You play a lot of iconic roles. First you had Ray Charles that you knocked out of the park, and you had Django last year. How do you feel taking on this type of role, considering it's completely different? And what did you do to prepare for it?
Oh, well, first of all, it was just, I think the nailing of Max is the main thing. I know people like Max. There was a guy named Richard who lived with his mom in his 40s, and if you know the history of Max, his father left him. He was actually married at one point. We don't go into that, but he was actually married at one point. And the reason being is because he couldn't get going. And so for an actor, that's perfect for guys like us. There's a building block right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you know that this guy's lost his father, immediately there's something about his character that's different. If you know that his mother dotes over him all the time and he's always seeking his mom's approval, which is a little bit like mine. I was adopted at 7 months. My mother, I knew though at the time. So I would always wait for her to come into town and I'm playing quarterback and I'm this and I'm that. And I was waiting for her to say, I like that. And she was a very tough woman. She now lives with me now. Everything's worked out. I don't want to make it seem like everything's depressed. But at that time, that was tough for me because I wanted her approval. So the same with Max. And if we could grab that for us as actors, and what was great about Marc is that once we set that platform of Max being from that, the Electro part was not easy, but it makes sense. But what was great is that Marc would not allow us to move until he actually got it right. He pushed. I don't know about what you guys experienced, but he pushed me. I don't know if he pushed me a little harder than everybody else, but he pushed, and I really appreciated that. So that when we look back on what we shot, that's the main ingredient from all of the characters that we played, whether it's Ray, whether it's Django or Willie Beeman. That's the same DNA or the same process that we've used in all of our character work. My name is Willie. Willie Beam. How you know that?
There's a lot of great merchandise and different things like that surrounding this movie and Spider-Man as a brand. But I wanted to know, Andrew, specifically, what's it like to see yourself as an action figure, to see yourself as
I try not to look. But then I went into Toys R Us before Christmas time, last Christmas, shopping for my nephews. And I was like, I'll meet you guys in the car. I needed just a half an hour to just kind of absorb one particular aisle. And it was humbling, just really, really humbling. And not something that I really identify with, It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like me. But it's really cool. It's just cool. Like, it's just as simple as that, really. But also it doesn't really mean anything, weirdly. It's the suit. Kids are going to be excited to buy the Spider-Man figure when he's got his mask on. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, people identify with Peter Parker, but it's not about the actor playing the role. It's about the everyman nature of Peter and the everyman nature of Spider-Man, and what he stands for and who he protects, all creatures great and small. And that's what's exciting. And the fact that I get to try to embody it and try to bring it to life for 5-6-year-olds, that's just an honor for me, and one that I don't take lightly or that personally, actually.
No, I think those are different things. I mean, the universe that we had conceived of began before we started shooting the first movie. So there are plans and plants and seeds that had sort of developed all around this. But the primary focus was just executing this movie really as best as we all could. Contained is an interesting word. I mean, this is operatic. There is a hugeness of scale to this movie, and as Andrew was saying, the ensemble I think is pretty extraordinary, but it is cohesive and it is direct, and I think there is a simple unifying theme that is at the heart of the film that I think I think will be very impactful. But it was fun. It's fun to like tease out little bits and pieces of other characters, and if you pay attention in this next movie, you'll see other things that might be in store for us in the future.
Thanks.
In the previous incarnation, I mean, the actors have changed. We had James Franco playing this main character. A lot of what kind of drove him was what happened to his father, and it kind of turned him. I would presume that there's a different trajectory here. Can you just talk a little bit about how you interact with Peter Parker?
Yeah, well, first off, in this version, Peter and Harry were childhood friends. And then Harry was sent off to a boarding school at kind of a young age, and because he inherently has a complicated relationship with Norman still, he never really went home, and he kind of stopped. He kind of just ignored his home life and stayed at school and partied and, probably got into a lot of things he shouldn't have gotten into, and started to try to buy his happiness because he had a kind of trust fund, and now he's graduated high school, and he's decided to go home for the first time, and he has to confront Peter, and he hasn't seen Peter in a really long time, and they are trying to reconcile their friendship, and I think a lot of what they find that they have in common is their complicated relationships with their fathers still.
Do you interact more with Max or with Electra? Do you guys have any interaction?
We have some interactions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mark, you touched on this earlier. When you were working on this movie, are you thinking ahead to the subsequent movies? And
Yes.
what are you laying the foundation for?
You'll have to wait and see. Hey, listen, I mean, just to address that, like, we really want to be protective of the plot of the movie. We want to protect the enjoyment that people should have when they walk into a theater and experiencing something for the first time. You know what I mean? And that's a really fun thing to do. So rather than being coy and dodgy, like, that's really what our intention is. And there is a lot of thought and a lot of consideration, a lot of detail work, and a lot of meetings behind closed doors about how the universe unfolds, but we're going to be very protective of how we reveal that information.
Yeah, this question is for Andrew from DaHaan. I have to ask. Can you talk a little bit about how Peter and Gwen's relationship evolves in this movie, and if there's a scene in particular that stands out to you?
Sorry. It's kind of linked to what I said earlier. It's tough to have a life as Peter. It's tough. It's like being an emergency aid worker. It's 24/7 his job. There's no breaks. You're always on call, and it's not that you can switch your beeper off or switch. Who has a beeper anymore? Jesus Christ. I'm like the original Stan Lee Spider-Man in 1962. You know, I can't switch it off. It's a physical impulse that Peter gets. It's like, I have to go. I'm sorry. So I could be in the middle of something incredible. I could be in the middle of a proposal. You know, I could be proposing to Gwen. I could be on one knee, and suddenly I'm like, I really got to go. I'm really, really sorry. Don't hit me. I love you. And I have to go and save a cat from a tree. You know, it's that small. And because of his overdeveloped sense of responsibility, it's like he's human. He's human. He's not superhuman. Ultimately, he's just a dude. And relationships are hard anyway, as we all know. But it's especially hard for someone who has to be so dedicated to his work, and that's part of the struggle that Peter has with Gwen in this story. But yeah, I mean.
That's a weird question.
Be honest.
Wow. Well, no, you the movie this size is all-consuming, and I think I met Alfonso Cuarón yesterday, who is a brilliant filmmaker, and I've been a long-time fan of his, and he said something when he was talking about doing Harry Potter, which I thought was really profound and very helpful to me as a filmmaker. And with 500 Days of Summer, it was very much a personal story with me and my friends. But, you know, when he's talking about Harry Potter, he's like, you know, you come in, you're the director, and you have to have a vision, and it's about you. And he said something about Harry Potter that I thought was very nice, which is like, you have to surrender to the material. I am at the service of something much bigger than myself. It's not about me. It's not about my vision necessarily. It's about supporting a character that we all know and love that is so much bigger than all of us. And learning how to surrender to that is a very difficult thing when your job is to be in control. And to negotiate with that is, I've had many life lessons that I won't get into.
Tell us.
About well, Dr. Garfield. But it was a really wonderful thing, because what you learn is that when people feel a sense of ownership, whether it's Andrew, Dane, or Jamie, or Matt, or Avi, you get a level of commitment that is much deeper than you could do if they're servicing something else. You know what I mean? So to me, like, I think you learn the power of surrender. How's that?
Beautiful.
Wow.
Question for Andrew. Andrew, I was just curious if there was ever any headway made on finding Peter Parker a boyfriend.
Very good question. Let me have a think. Let me have a little think. Listen, that what I said in that Entertainment Weekly interview was a question. It was just a simple philosophical question about sexual orientation, about prejudice, about, you know, I obviously long for the time where, you know, sexual orientation, skin color is a small thread in the fabric of a human being. And all men are created equal, and women. Sorry, women.
And women.
To speak to the idea of me and Michael B. Jordan getting together, it was tongue in cheek, absolutely tongue in cheek. It would be illogical for me in the third movie to be like, you know what, I'm kind of attracted to guys. That's just not going to work. That's clear. You know, it was just more a philosophical question, and what I believe about Spider-Man is that he does stand for everybody: black, white, Chinese, Malaysian, gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. I mean, he will put himself in harm's way for anyone. He is colorblind. He is blind to sexual orientation, and that is what he has always represented to me. He represents the everyman, but more importantly, maybe he represents the underdog, and those marginalized, those who come up against great prejudice, which I, as a middle-class, straight, white man, don't really understand so much. You know what I mean? And when Stan Lee first wrote and created this character, the outcast was the computer nerd, was the science nerd, was the guy that couldn't get the girl. Those guys now run the world. Mm-hmm. So how much of an outcast is that version of Peter Parker anymore? That's my question. Just love for the underdog, protecting those that need protection. And there's not in terms of teenagers nowadays, there's normal horror stories you hear about young gay men and women not feeling accepted by society, attempting suicide, committing suicide in some cases. And who else is there to stand up for, more importantly than them? Equally to everyone else, but we're all the same. Is my point.
I think it was a great question, and thank you for even just posing it and putting it out there. I'm sure it'll be a very long time before we see a gay superhero in a huge movie, but just even mentioning it is, I think, a great thing.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, I really love the design of Electro. Can you go into how you came up with it? And Jamie, did you have any input into it?
There's a lot of different incarnations of Electro in the comics, and I tried to think about how to do it with a yellow and green suit, and I just couldn't make any sort of logical sense out of that. But I wanted to keep this. There are certain elements of his creation that I want to protect, but I will say that, when you look at a storm cloud coming over the horizon, it's coming out. I remember growing up in Wisconsin and seeing these terrifying storms coming over the plains, and the electricity on the inside of them would explode, and you see these flashes of billowing light, and that is a cue that we used to develop the sort of internal workings of Electro. And the other thing is, I felt it was important to understand the visage, the face, the emotion of and preserve Jamie's performance within the character itself. And so we sort of stepped away from doing a mask and instead created this creature that felt human, but also felt godlike. And that was something that I think was really important to present to Spider-Man as an antagonist, something that's terrifying and a little bit creepy and immensely powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I was very good.
I wanted to throw something. I don't care.
It's not my job.
Oh boy.